Hi everyone, my name is Charu and I'm a writer and a journalist, and I wanted to talk about some personal things that have happened over the last 2 weeks since the killing of George Floyd that have happened to me personally. And they involved sort of being re-triggered with trauma that I have experienced. And I don't think I'm alone in this, but there were two things in particular that brought up some stuff for me. One of them was this weak apology that the NFL offered, saying, hey, we were wrong. We didn't really get that this was such a big deal. Sorry about all that stuff about kneeling, respectfully kneeling, I might add, for the national anthem. We get it. We'll do better. It seems to me, my opinion, it seems very fake and it's not very real. But it reminded me of how many times I feel like people of color have tried to address this. What you're seeing in the streets is the result of this like collective rage. And I feel like personally, I've tried to address it in a calm fashion before it exploded. So one thing that I remembered, and then I looked it up, I had written this email 4 years ago after the killing of Keith Lamont Scott in Charlotte, and there were some protests, and I was asked to write an op-ed piece for a publication, and I wrote it, and then I realized that wherever I went, Black and brown people were kind of huddled together talking about it, and like, oh, could you believe it? No, 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 no. And then I would see white folks just go along with their day, like not even aware something had happened. And I saw this also after the election, right? Because there's this bubble of privilege where you don't have to talk about it, but the rest of us do. So I wrote an email to the people that were the heads of the YMCA where I worked out at. And I said, I think the nation's at a tipping point. I realize this is uncomfortable. I think we should have a forum. I think we should talk about it. They met with me. There was no forum. They invited me to sit on a diversity and inclusion board, which included a bunch of brown and black folks that already knew that this was a problem. So all of this has kind of brought up how many times personally I've tried and I was met with denial and dismissal. So, I have some rage about this. I'm just going to be honest. And honestly, if you're just met with denial and dismissal, it's not even as bad as losing your job, right? The other thing that happened was there were two black journalists with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that were sidelined. Their editors felt like they were displaying bias by some social media posts. And then it was revealed that there was a white reporter there that did kind of the same thing and was just kind of slapped on the wrist. This reminded me of a story that I did in a rural western North Carolina county. I want to say it was in the town of Robbinsville, but I don't remember. And I don't have access to those archives because I've done thousands of stories, thousands of packages in my career, and obviously I didn't save all of them. But I remember it was involving some concerns black parents had with this school district. And full disclosure, I went to a racist school district. I went to a school district that didn't tell my parents that they had a gifted program because they didn't want to see another Asian and Indian kid in it. So yeah, I got biased. Yeah, I've seen those places. Yeah. So anyway, I did feel like I did a fair job. I had both sides. That was that, right? Well, someone at the school district felt like it was not. And I got a letter put in my file. I've never had a non-white news director and a non-white assistant a news director. And so I was reprimanded for that. And so when this happened to these journalists, it brought back a lot of memories for me of how many times, first of all, newsrooms are not diverse enough. And then something like that happens when you try to draw attention to something that's a real issue. It's almost like it's only okay if the white reporter does it first or the white person's the hero figuring this out. Several news organizations that I respect missed this George Floyd story. It was buried so deep. And if you are a newsroom that you buried that story the day after it happened and that video was released, it tells me you do not have enough people of color in your newsroom, or you do and you don't listen to them, because that was the palpitation was building. Okay. And that video, when it got released, was like, you got a smoldering flame and I just threw gasoline on it. So we need to really wake up when we tell these stories and in these places, okay? And that was a lot of why I decided to start my podcast and kind of get back into this. So one of the pluses of something that's happened, I think, in the 2 weeks since his death is that there have been a lot of discussions globally, not just in this country, about anti-blackness in various communities. And in the Indian community, you know, our obsession with fair skin and how we don't want to speak our native languages because English is considered, you know, just like, oh, you know, she speaks English so well, he speaks English so well, and we're not proud of our own heritage. So I'm glad that we're having these discussions, and I want to tell Indian folks that still don't really get this Black Lives Matter movement and why it's important to say that. Trust me and believe me. I have grown up with white folks. I've been surrounded by mostly white people my whole life, okay, except for the places that I went, kind of my community with my family as a child. I live in a predominantly white area right now, and I'm married to a white man. If white folks don't like the Black people, they don't like you either. Don't believe anything else. They don't like you either. Trust me on this. We have been used sort of in this divide and conquer thing with Black folks, the model minority myth. There's also a case that's has been before the Supreme Court, or is going to be on their roster, involving Yale University and Asian American students. Don't let us be used as pawns in this, okay? Because dividing and conquering in these situations, they seek to sort of divert our attention and distract us. Don't get distracted. Remember, we are the people of Gandhiji, Bhagat Singh. Remember Bhagat Singh? Remember what they did to him? Jhansi Rani, Subhash Chandra Bose, Nehruji, all these people. And that still is a part of us, that activism, that call. And, you know, Gandhi even asked us to leave behind the things that were holding us back as a people. He always said that if we're going to get rid of the British, we've got to get rid of our caste system and the anti-blackness that we have. So don't forget that. And white folks, if we can have these discussions with our communities, you can have them too in your communities. I have several Brazilian friends that have told me that there are discussions coming up with them about anti-blackness. So it's time for all of us to kind of wake up and talk about this. I also want to talk about when I wanted to start this podcast to kind of talk about the information and how information gets mixed up and misconstrued, and it's so easy to do that now, right? It's also really an interesting time because you can go straight to the source. So I think it was the second episode, it's in season 1, Learn to Discern. There's been no other time in our history where that is more important, that you learn to discern what you're hearing. Even if it's something that you tend to agree with, you might want to look further and figure out if that really is the truth. So you hear defund the police and you might think that means something. Look it up. Go straight to the source. Even if you have your media that you trust or your newspapers or whatever, go further and see. Everything's being told to you through a lens and a gatekeeper, right? So just go straight to the source and learn to discern for yourself. Even I've started doing this with politicians that I don't really like, and I'll hear things and I'm like, God, did he really say that? So I'll go to the source and find out. We live in this amazing time where we can do that, you know? I'm gonna come back tomorrow and I'm going to talk about some patterns that I'm seeing that I think we need to work on now before they get out of hand. I wanna make sure that anything I put out there is moving us forward, and I wanna put forth ideas, okay? And not just, it's so important to kind of feel and process everything we've gone through, but it's also important to strategize, and I want to be a part of that. So tomorrow, I'm gonna get my thoughts together and come back with that. So thank you so much. And you can listen to my podcast anywhere podcasts are heard.